Well, for more insights on this, we're joined from New York by Charles Mitchell, Executive Director of Knowledge, Content and Quality at the Conference Board, which published that very survey. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Rachelle. It's good to be here.
So were there any surprises for you in this latest Global Leader Survey?
You know, actually, when you look at the recession notion, when we look at the forecast, it's going to be slow growth, 2.5% for this year globally. But the concern around recession is the danger of this is that it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Right now, the numbers are really pointing towards, this slow but steady growth that we've seen over the last few years. And this concern about recession, as I say, becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And we're already starting to see some actions. Another big concern for CEOs was the notion of cost reduction. So we're starting to see some of that myth or concern about recession in the minds of CEOs transforming into some reality. And that's a concern. That should be a concern for all businesses right now.
So then to that point, as we look at the top external concerns, recession, global trade and competition, what sorts of conversations are CEOs having about how to manage these issues and their strategies?
Yeah, the notion about trade, I mean, this is just something that one has to ride out. They don't really have a lot of control over it. But when you come to the intensifying competition, that's where you get to the notion of looking to collaborate more, to be more inventive. More innovative cultures is one of the top internal concerns for CEOs. So they're really looking to innovate their way out of this competitive fight that they're in. The notion of collaboration, going outside their corporate walls for non-traditional partners, is very much on their agenda. It takes a big cultural shift for a lot of organizations. There's risk, there's IP concerns, but still that's one of the main growth strategies that they see coming forward, and that's how they'll handle that intensifying competition.
So just how much have the top concerns changed over the last few years, and how are CEOs responding?
Well, the recession last year it was top of the list. This year again it's top of the league table. But 2 years ago it was 19th, right? So we see that very much as a notion. We're seeing more concern around intensifying competition. That is something that we've seen rise over the last 3 or 4 years. I think one of the more interesting aspects too is this notion behind climate change. It's always been near the end of our survey, near the bottom of our survey as an external concern. This year we've seen it's just outside the top 10, and that is something that kind of surprised us a little bit. As I say, traditionally it's been towards the bottom. Now there's a lot of concern, and it's being driven by customer demand, consumer demand, and it's also being driven by regulation. The notion that public reporting, non-financial reporting of climate risk is really on the rise, both from an investor standpoint, demands to see that climate risk strategy, and also from a regulatory side. So that's one of the big changes that we've seen. I think one of the other changes that we've seen is this notion of how CEOs define talent. It used to be about high profile, high potential, and now it's this concern about talent and talent development spreads throughout the rank and file of the organization. It's a much broader concept than it was 3 or 4 years ago.
And when you look at CEOs in mature versus emerging markets, how do their concerns compare?
Well, yeah, there's concern around trade much more in emerging markets than there is in the mature markets. There's also more concern around performance management of existing talent in emerging markets than there is right at this point in time in mature markets. There is more concern about tighter labor markets in emerging markets. It's really more about not bodies but skill shortages than there is in emerging markets, in mature markets. I mean, right now we're in some of the tightest labor markets in decades in the U.S. and Europe. So those are some of the really differing concerns. There's also there's more concern around cybersecurity in mature markets than there is in emerging markets.
All right, thank you for your insights. Charles Mitchell there, Executive Director of Knowledge, Content and Quality at the Conference Board.